Hi guys. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to pick up with the elements of a crime PowerPoint that we started when we were doing synchronous last time. So today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be building off of where we left off. But today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about indirect crimes. These are going to be people that are at least associated with potential crime that was committed, and their involvement can kind of vary in different ways. So there are several of these that we're going to talk about, but what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about the accomplice to a crime. An accomplice is going to be someone who actively assists in committing a crime. Now you can see the pictures that I have here. This is Bonnie and Clyde. If you're not familiar with them, this was a couple that committed multiple different kind of robberies and burglaries across the Midwest during the Great Depression. Now, they were considered to be accomplices because both of them had their role in committing these crimes. So an accomplice is someone who's considered like an assistant, that they help in committing the crime. Now, an accomplice can be convicted of the same offense as the person who is leading it. So in this particular case, Bonnie and Clyde were basically, they had the same roles in that they were both committing the crime, but an accomplice can be someone who just assists in doing that. So I give this example. A driver of a getaway car is going to be considered an accomplice. Now, we're going to talk more a little bit later on as to sort of a different classification of this, but a driver, a driver of a getaway car that's going to be used after the principal offender commits a murder could be charged with that same murder. Now, it depends on a few different factors, and we're going to talk about that more in a little bit. But just so you're aware, the accomplice actually helps in the commission of a crime. Now, next one we're going to talk about is going to be what's called conspiracy. Now, for a conspiracy, this is really just kind of the planning, the preparation. If you're involved in planning or preparing to commit a crime, but don't actively participate in the crime, you can't necessarily be convicted of the crime itself, but you can be convicted of conspiracy, that you helped plan this out. That it's possible that without your involvement, without your planning, the crime may have not been committed. So conspiracy is going to be a separate charge in and of itself. Now, also what this means is for the principal, the person who does commit this crime, they can be charged for the crime itself, and they can also be charged for conspiracy. They can be charged for the planning or the preparation of that crime as a separate entity. So you can be found guilty of robbery, and also at the same time, you can be charged with the conspiracy of that robbery. So what we're going to see is oftentimes if it's a particular case that might be a little bit weak, that maybe the prosecution can't get a conviction in this example of robbery, they can also charge you with conspiracy. So maybe they won't necessarily get a conviction on the robbery, but they can get a conviction on the conspiracy to commit robbery. Now, as an example of this, the assassination of President Lincoln is going to be a much wider conspiracy than just the assassination itself. There were a handful of people that were involved in it. Some people actively tried to assassinate other members of the government. But when they're eventually caught and charged, there are going to be some people that really had nothing to do with the assassination itself, but they were potentially responsible for the conspiracy. So, for example, there was a woman who was found guilty of conspiracy to kill President Lincoln because it was her hotel, it was her restaurant where the conspirators met to discuss their plan. Now, she's going to be convicted, and there wasn't necessarily a whole lot of evidence against her, but it was her hotel, it was her restaurant where these men were meeting. So she was found guilty of conspiracy because without her, it's possible that this plan could have never been launched. Now, next one are accessories. Now, I'm always kind of careful when I do this because accessories to commit a crime can take a few different forms. The first one is what's called accessory before the fact. Now, what an accessory before the fact is it means that you were aware that this other person was going to commit the crime, and really you did nothing to stop it, and in fact you somewhat encouraged it. You helped it to take place. If you're an accessory before the fact, you can be charged with the same crime as the person who did it. So I just give this example. If someone's going to rob a bank and you know about it, and do nothing to stop it, it's possible you could be an accessory before the fact. Now, that could be a difficult case to prove. So an accessory before the fact has to be somewhat involved in the commission of the crime. Now, there's also going to be what's called the accessory after the fact. An accessory after the fact is someone who doesn't know about the potential commission of this crime until after it's already been done. So I kind of give the example of if someone robs a bank and is running outside and they find you in a car and they jump in the car and order you to drive them somewhere, you could be considered an accessory because you're helping them get away with this commission of the crime. Now, that's probably not going to happen, but it's possible. Now, the thing is, you didn't know about it beforehand, so you cannot be an accessory before the fact. You're an accessory after the fact. Now, I give these other examples of more kind of classic ways you can be an accessory after the fact. If someone commits a crime, and again, we'll kind of use the example of a bank robbery, and they run to your home and look for you for assistance, you can be charged with harboring a fugitive, that you give them assistance after the crime is committed. Now, you may not have known that it was going to happen, so you can't be before the fact, but you can be charged with harboring a fugitive. You're an accessory after the fact. Now, same thing with like aiding their escape. If you give them any kind of assistance, no matter what it is, if you let them in their house, if you give them money, if you give them your car, anything like that can be considered aiding an escape. And also, you can also be charged with what's called obstructing justice, which is basically any kind of way to kind of almost cover up that a crime has taken place. If you potentially delete emails or text messages or anything that would assist the police in bringing this person to justice, then yes, you can be charged with obstructing justice. That's accessory after the fact. Now, for number 4, crimes of omission. There are multiple crimes of omission, but I think there's one that kind of just makes this easy. What a crime of omission is you didn't commit a crime by doing something. You did a crime by not doing something. So you failed to act in a certain way. That's a crime of omission. You've left something out. So I always kind of give the example of if you don't pay your taxes, that's a crime of omission. Because by law, you have to pay your taxes every year. If you do not do that, if you fail to file your taxes, then you have committed a crime of omission because you didn't do something that you are required to do. Now, I was explaining yesterday, too, about how being ignorant of the law is never an excuse. If you break a law by not doing something, you are basically saying that it's your responsibility. You have to know the law, and you chose not to do it. Now, if it comes down to something like taxes, then yes, you have to pay your taxes every year. If it's something small and you could say, I didn't even know that was a crime, it depends on what you've done. Maybe you don't even get charged, but at the same time, ignorance of the law is never an excuse. You have to fulfill your obligations by the law. If you do not, then it's a crime of omission. You know the law, or at least it's assumed that you do, and you choose not to follow it. Now, last one we're going to talk about are going to be preliminary crimes. Crimes that take place before the commission of a crime actually happens. Now, again, this can be kind of planning, or this can be almost like setting up what a crime will be, what's going to take place. So the first one that I give is solicitation. Solicitation is asking someone or encouraging someone to commit a crime. Now, I kind of use this example because this actually came up, if I remember correctly, I think it was just about 2 or 3 years ago, when there was a woman who was texting with her ex-boyfriend, and he had threatened suicide before. And in these text messages, they're pretty gruesome. She's actually going to encourage him to do that. She's going to get charged with solicitation, but she also gets charged with, I don't think she was charged with first-degree murder, but I believe she was charged with manslaughter, if I remember right. She got convicted of both of them because she was encouraging him to do this. So she got solicitation and also, like I said, I believe it was manslaughter, if I remember right. I believe, too, she's still in prison for this, if I remember correctly. Next one is an attempt. Now, you might have heard of this before. An attempt is where you do try to commit a crime, but you are unsuccessful in pulling that crime off. So one of these that comes up probably more than others is attempted murder. If you try to murder someone, but you are unsuccessful, then you can't charge that person with murder necessarily because no one died. But you can charge them with attempted murder because an attempt is an unsuccessful attempt at committing a crime. Now, last one is the conspiracy. Now, we've talked about this before. The conspiracy is going to be you are that you are agreeing to commit a crime, that you're part of the process, that you're part of the planning potentially, and perhaps that without you and your planning, this crime could have not been committed. Now, let me just tell you this. I know I've gone a little bit fast today because I think for our time purposes, it would be good to kind of get through this so that I can get to the other things that I want to do. I'm going to go ahead and just post this on Schoology. So again, as we've done in the past, just be certain that you take your notes down just as we usually do. This is Unit 2 stuff. So again, you'll not be tested for this on Unit 1. Your Unit 1 exam will be when I see you guys on Tuesday the 29th. This is all rolled into Unit 2. So for Unit 2, when you eventually have your exam, you'll be responsible for this as well. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I'll go ahead and post this, okay? Thanks, guys.